The next morning we'll begin our 4-day classical tour. It'll take us out to Corinth and Olympia, and we go by bus. All the arrangements are taken care of, and we have the services of one of the best guides in Greece, Poupie.
Okay, there we're ready for the road. Welcome. I know that Poupie means all kinds of things in English, but what can I do? I cannot change my name. You'll be amazed what some English names mean in Greek.
She is a wonderful tour escort. She filled us with stories of mythology and history and told us about current society.
Mycenae is the oldest place we see on this tour. We will see the fortress, the Acropolis of Mycenae. So we'll drive from Mycenae to Nafplion, which is in the Gulf on the east. Then we'll go to Epidauros. There we'll see the most famous theater of the ancient Greek world, the best in acoustic.
Now, this theater is 4th century BC, and it can seat roughly 14,000 people. It is still in use in summertime from June to September, the weekends. There are 55 lines of seats, and roughly there can be 14,000 people.
We're staying nearby in the charming waterfront town of Nafplion.
Nafplion is a beautiful city. That it's a small country with a little bit of everything, with a tremendous variety of landscapes, handsome mountains, beautiful shores, islands, all kinds of vegetation, anything from walnuts and fern trees to palm trees and fig trees, because we have varieties of altitude, we have mountains, we have plains, we have islands, we have variety of climate. We have continental and Mediterranean. So we're going to stop here by the canal. This is the canal now. Here you can walk to the canal, stand on that pedestrian lane and make your photograph.
The Corinth Canal is a ribbon of water cut like a slash through this peninsula. It's 4 miles long, only 30 yards wide. It was built 100 years ago, and it connects the Aegean Sea with the Mediterranean Sea. In ancient days, this narrow isthmus had a road that connected the eastern world with the western world, so it became one of the most important sites in the entire classical world. For a time, it was the capital of Greece, and then later the Romans took it over, and it became the Roman capital of Greece. And today we can go to the archaeological site and see the remains of the ancient town of Corinth, one of the largest archaeological sites in Greece.
And here in Corinth, as we have not just the temple, but part of the city, we'll try and imagine the function of an ancient city to get the everyday life feeling, which we don't have the chance to do in other sites, right? So I'll show you also the museum.
This small museum is worth your time, for it shows the progression of pottery styles, and it also has a collection of marble statues of some of the Roman emperors and governors of the site. The museum was first opened in the 1930s and founded by the American School of Classical Studies.
Let us now go to see the square from where came all those objects, because what you see is all authentic and comes from the square we'll visit and from the city that was down the plain around that square. Then we have the Ionic, that is the one with the volute capital. That's graceful and elegant. It had a fluting, it was more fluted than the Doric, and it did have a base, and it was more slender. Then we have the Corinthian, that in its purest form is the one just before last against that wall. It's a basket out of which grows the acantha leaf. The Doric and the Ionic are the older. They are evaluating almost parallel, and then comes in the 5th century the Corinthian, the first appearing, and it becomes more general in later time.
It's very handy to have Poupie leading us through the site, for she brings these ancient ruins to life with her tales, starting with the oldest temple of Apollo.
Now, when Greece was liberated of the Turkish occupation, except for the temple of Apollo here, there was nothing to see. All this was buried under a village, and all that had to be excavated. So all this was layers and layers of times. What you see now, the level on which we'll go down and walk is Roman, and just about a meter further down is the Greek layer. But as here it comes downhill and it's like this. This is ancient Greek, and down there is Roman.
Corinth has one of the most impressive collections of ruins to be found anywhere in Greece, and this is a result of its strong economic position back in the archaic days in the years 500 BC through 300 BC.
And the early Greek temples, their columns were made of wood. Then they started making them of sandstone, which is easy to chisel, and they were one slab with heavy capitals like those ones. A century later, when you see the Parthenon in Athens and the classical temples, you see that the columns are not one slab, that they are in slices, in drums, 2 by 2 linked together, and the capitals lighter. So this is the Doric style in its early steps, when it's still one block with heavy suppressive capitals. It did not yet find its proportions. And where there's that building with the deep part there, that was a fountain, the fountain of Pyrene. There were many fountains in the area because the land of the Peloponnese, because of the clay layers and the conglomerate layers, it shapes underground basins of water, natural reservoirs. So downhill there are basins like this from where came the water into that fountain. So all that's a line of stores, but the central one is that big arch you see has become a small church. They repaired it and they made it an early Christian church. That's why it still stands. There were smaller stores on the sides and a portico in front. Now the rooms you see there in the background were stores also.
You can see the main Roman road leading into the city, lined with ancient shops, leading up to the fountains and the baths. This was the administrative headquarters of the Romans. So they built their town on top of the earlier Greek ruins. The Roman era really begins with Julius Caesar about the year 44 BC, and it continued for nearly 400 years until the Romans were crushed by the invasions of the barbarians and the Gauls. Well-preserved steps and terraces and platforms, and you go past the ancient Roman pillars and see the statues in the museum. It's a scholarly center. Even today there's extensive archaeological work continually underway at the site. They're always digging and finding more ruins and unearthing them and preserving them and stabilizing them, trying to interpret what it all means. This Temple of Apollo is one of the oldest Greek temples. The notorious Roman Emperor Nero also played a role in this site, for in the year 67 AD, he tried to dig a canal. He got 6,000 slaves working for him by hand with picks and shovels, and they attempted to dig a canal without any success at all. It was a grandiose plan that failed, only to be achieved nearly 2,000 years later. We're passing this beautiful scenery of apricot trees and olive groves on our way to another one of the most important ruins from ancient classical antiquity, the palace fortress of Mycenae. We're going to visit the Acropolis, which is, according to Homer, the home of Agamemnon and the scene of the Orestes tragedies.